Hey guys, and welcome to another YouTube video. Today we are doing something slightly different. It has been requested, and we are going to be reading the chapters from the current hunt event. So, with that being said, I hope you enjoy. Chapter 1. The moon, in all her glory, was dying. Even those who knew nothing of the corruption could sense her decline. She had taken on a sickly glow that cast a light of dread and misfortune on New Orleans. The ignorant and the innocent could do nothing but look up at the source of that disquieting light with reverence and growing trepidation. Those untouched by the moon's first assault were beginning to turn. Panic began to spread, and alongside it came despair, exposing more hearts to the devastation of her pallid effervescence. Oh, night's eye, mother of twilight and tide, could your steady pulse fall still? Could your light be dimmed and put out? Those who knew of the corruption were recruited to end the tragedy. Hunters from all walks of life and faith gathered behind Mr. Cherry, hoping that in helping him solve his problems, they might also solve their own. But hope is a slippery thing, easily corrupted. Kevin Linus watched from the window of his home by the pond and the willow. Outside, Mr. Cherry waited beside the circle he had drawn in the dirt on so many moonlit nights before. He would not have to wait long. We were all slaves to habit and desire in the end. The sound of her footsteps preceded her grim silhouette, and Mary Oakenshaw walked straight into the circle without hesitation or greeting. The dirty, dripping bag in her hands began to burn fast, her clothes quickly following, and as the screams began again, Kevin wept. He would scream with her, would share her pain, and stop the terrible cycle. But though he tried, no sound escaped his mouth. As the flames grew, twisting their way around Mary's neck, she suddenly snapped her head towards Kevin, a knowing, accusatory expression on her face. While Mr. Cherry looked on in sadistic glee, Mary crossed the ritual markings, sparks erupting where they broke, and ran toward the house. When she reached the door, she screamed and tore at the panels until her nails broke and bled. "Why didn't you help me?" she wailed, and then he woke up. Chapter 2. All the encounters had been the same. The chase, the trails of blood, the confrontation, and the defeat. As cyclical and constant as the moon. The only thing that had changed were the snakes. Kevin Linus had been pursuing Mr. Orwell Cherry for weeks across southern Louisiana. From New Orleans to Baton Rouge and back, the boy had followed the AHA administrator's trail, his focus interrupted only by the hunter assassins Mr. Cherry hired to stop him. But the moon had been gracious in her blessing, and Kevin had gained an otherworldly intuition for gunplay and combat. All went back to Mr. Cherry, unable to hunt. He finally cornered Mr. Cherry in Ascension Parish. My, how you've grown," Mr. Cherry said, as he spread his arms in mock welcome. His 3 hunter companions kept their guns warily trained on the boy. "Haven't you done enough?" Kevin replied, pointing his pistol at Mr. Cherry's head. But all the man did was smile. "Young man, you're in my way." At that, Mr. Cherry snapped his fingers, and a shot rang out into the night. Kevin looked down to see a red blossom blooming from a hole in his stomach. He looked up, and a second shot rang out. Chapter 3. Kevin fell to his knees as he clutched his bloody stomach with a keening wail. "What a wonderful sound," Mr. Cherry said. "Truly fitting that it's the last thing anyone will hear from you." Mr. Cherry walked over to the boy and kicked him onto his back. Tears welled in Kevin's eyes as he groaned and convulsed. But when he moved, his hands to expose the bullet wound, he found it transformed from bloody blossom to a writhing vista of protrusions and pulsing sores. And then a snake slithered from his bloody sleeve. The snake was small, milky-eyed, and covered in the blood and viscera of Kevin's flesh. Kevin ripped at the shirt, widening the tear to reveal a coiled brood of small snakes nested in the wound, as if just hatched, scaly maggots uncoiling themselves from his flesh. Chapter 4. For 2 agonizing hours, Mr. Orwell Cherry kneeled over the boy's body, tearing and slicing at Kevin's flesh as he moaned in tired agony. "What's happening?" Kevin asked. The question was met with silence and another incision. From the fresh, gaping wound, Mr. Cherry plucked the body of a snake. Again and again, Mr. Cherry pulled a snake from the wound. Again and again, the animals sunk their venomous fangs into his hands. It was just what Mr. Cherry needed. With each overwhelming, nauseating rush, he thrust his hands deeper into the wound, probing for more. The largest snake came from the final incision, a bloody, jagged line from hip to heart. Mr. Cherry's assistant struggled to force it into a bag, and as it writhed, too powerful even for 3 hulking men, it clamped its jaws around the ankle of the tallest hunter. It provided him no rush, rather leaving its victim paralyzed and helpless, silent witness to Mr. Cherry's administrations. Was this really what they were fighting for? To allow this man to torture an innocent boy? "Thank you, Kevin," Mr. Cherry whispered. "You've earned mercy." The administrator drew close, holding his gun to the boy's temple. He caressed the trigger, savoring the moment. Kevin looked to the moon and back to Mr. Cherry. With his last strength, he twisted his body and sunk his teeth into the man's wrist.